And it was honestly so surreal. I can only describe it as we were kind of intrigued. I wasn't scared, but I couldn't explain it. And I think we both felt more, not concerned, but we just wanted to know who was up there and if that was going to be a problem for us.
Welcome to the very first episode of Hey, That's Weird. My name's Luc Frost, and this is my new podcast about the paranormal, the unexplained, and the weird. I've always been a fan of these kind of podcasts, and now I finally get to make my own, which is pretty exciting. There'll be no gimmicks, no ads, no weird voices, just your stories and me discussing them. My storyteller today is Sam. I met Sam playing in bands growing up in the UK. Shout out to T-Kiff and Stillbust. We once did a really greasy van tour together across Europe, and one day Sam got so drunk at breakfast that he was hungover for his band's set in Budapest. The show turned out to be hot garbage anyway, so it really didn't matter at all. It was the lowest point of a very, very fun tour. Anyway, that's beyond the point. Sam is an avid outdoorsman, an extremely talented musician, and a fantastically kind human being. When I put the word out on social media for stories for this podcast, Sam was one of the first people to respond. Turns out he has quite a few stories. Hopefully, I can convince him to come back in the future and give us another one, but for now, this is the one that really stood out to me. Alright, Sam, let's get weird.
My name's Sam, and I live near Gloucester in England. When I recently saw that Luke had posted on Instagram asking if anyone he knew had a weird story or experience, I thought, yeah, I've got one. A little bit of background on me. Well, I work in aerospace calibration currently. I've done for the last kind of 5 or 6 years, but prior to that, I always worked in outdoor stores, selling camping gear, hiking gear, that kind of thing. Mostly because my life has been quite outdoors focused. Always been a keen mountain biker, did loads of hiking, loads of wild camping, anything that really got me outside. I even worked in the south of France as a river guide for a year as well, which was pretty special. But yeah, so that's kind of the background. My outdoors life has been like sort of key to me, and this story does revolve around the outdoors. It's an experience that was, well, certainly weird. So if we go back to just before COVID, my partner Emma, who was living up north, was just about to move down, but was just visiting for a weekend, and we thought we'd get a wild camp in while she was down, because the weather was looking pretty good. I think it was about mid-September. It'd been pretty sunny, pretty warm, and we thought, you know what, let's go and do a camp. And recently I'd been spending a bit of time down at the River Wye in Forest of Dean, which isn't far from Gloucester. Anyway, Emma and myself thought it'd be really good to just go for a wild camp in a cave, which seems like a weird idea, but we'd seen it and scoped it out and thought, yeah, it's flat, it's got a big opening, might be a good spot for a fire if we want to cook some dinner. And we thought, yeah, we'll go and check it out. So, plan was, pack our bags, select the bits we're going to need, sleeping mat, sleeping bag, bivy bag, pillow, obviously beer. We took a fire pit and some bits to start a fire, so we thought, yeah, cool, we'll get that together. Made the kind of like 35-minute drive out to the forest where we were going to park up for the night, which was just kind of outside the gates of an actual car park, because we didn't want to get locked in or get a parking ticket whilst we're parked up in this car park. But once parked outside the gates, we made our way down through the car park to where there are some fence lines with some warning danger signs, because there's old mine workings and cliff edges in that area. So we hop the fence and we make our way down from the very, very top of these cliffs, scramble our way down a little bit, down the climbers' paths, to this low-level path, which sits at the foot of the cliff, but at the top of a very, very steep wooded slope that drops down to the river. This path is kind of for the climbers. It's a spot frequented by local climbers. There's a selection of climbs or walls along this path which sits just at the base of the cliff, so you can make your choice of the climb you fancy, and also entrances to cave systems where local cavers will go for a day out, or experienced professionals will take groups caving, and they're dotted all along, some at path level and some kind of like higher up the cliff as you look up. So we made our way down along that path, and it's probably about, 6, 7 in the evening. It's still light-ish, but it's going to get dark soon. There's enough light for us to find where we want to go. Kind of the premise of wild camping is you never want to arrive too early, because you're not meant to do it. We're not allowed to do it in the UK. So you come down, and you pitch late, and you leave early. So we were heading down a bit later on. It's a spot that you're not going to get many people walking past other than climbers and cavers, and to be honest, they're not really going to care, but it's kind of just good etiquette to do that. So yeah, we headed down, we got over the fence, we scrambled down the kind of steep, wooded, loamy path until we found the bottom of the cliff edge, walked along it, had a look up, and we spotted where we wanted to go. It's kind of an opening, I'd say about 14 feet up, 14 feet from the path. A bit of a greasy, well-polished kind of rock holes to climb yourself up into. But got ourselves up into this cave. I'd look around at the beautiful treetops that you could see from the mouth of the cave. And thought, yeah, this is it. This is going to be a really good night. So, we're in the cave. The view is gorgeous. You can see it with the treetops, with the River Wye flowing beneath you. Trees as far as you can see. It's absolutely stunning. If you turn around in the cave and look back further into the darkness, go right to the very back corner with the torch on, and you can see a small opening. And this is where like an entrance to a caving system, like a potholing system, begins. We're not there for that this time. We've been and done that sort of thing in the past, and it is good fun, but we were just there for a night of camping, having a chat, having a fire, having a beer, cooking some food. You're kind of aware that system's behind you, and if you've watched The Descent, you're kind of like, oh, I don't know what's going to come crawling out of there at night, but it isn't something you really focus on, especially if you do a lot of wild camping. There's a lot of noises you experience when you're either in the woods in hammocks, if you're on the mountains in a tent, things you perceive to be noises of things that aren't actually there. But we didn't dwell on that fact too much, so we focused on the task at hand, which was getting a bit of firewood so we could use our fire pit, only a small one, like one that would kind of like sit 4 burgers on it, and get that heated up, get the flames burning down so we had some hot coals to cook over, if you like, and then, yeah, to cook our dinner. So I went out first of all, came down from that ledge, kind of that greasy rock ledge. We brought some, like a rope with us, or technically they were hammock straps, but they were long enough for us to just rappel down in and out in the dark without slipping out onto that little path and dropping down off into the woods. So yeah, drop down off there, get onto the path, walk my way around a little bit to the left, where it slightly flattens out to a little plateau about kind of like, 10 foot. When I say plateau, it's still sloped downwards, but it's not as steep as the rest. So get down there, and I grab like an armful of dry dead wood that's lying on the floor. Head torch on, that's all I got with me. Look around the corner, nothing, complete darkness, as you'd expect, because we're on the edge of a cliff up in the woods above a river, and there's no one around. It's not really prime time for climbing, so didn't really expect to see anyone. Got the wood, came back, and sort of like gradually threw it up piece by piece to Emma, who was waiting at the top of the cave. I couldn't carry it all up in my arms, so I threw bit by bit up to Emma. Emma received it, and I came back up. So got the fire going, waited for it to burn down, cracked open our first beer. We only had 2 beers with us, we weren't there to get drunk, it was just a couple of casual beers. So whilst we're sitting there waiting for that fire to burn down, we start to hear what sounds like heavy breathing, if you like somebody had just walked up the hill. Like quite heavy breathing, and it wasn't anything really concerning, but you thought, okay, somebody else has got the same idea as us. They're like, we're camping one of the caves, because there's more than just one cave up, there's quite a few, and there's one much further on along down that path that I stayed in probably about 4 or 5 years before that. Much bigger opening, big wide platform inside it with a bit of a hollow in it, which is perfect if it's a bit windy for a fire, because there's nothing's going to blow it out. But the issue with that cave is you have to traverse a path about 12 inches wide and probably about, 10 meters long, but with a sheer drop on the right hand side. And as I've gotten older, my ability to do stuff with exposure without a rope has kind of like really limited itself. I've gone a bit softer with things like that. I guess I've gained more fear. So I've not really been back in that cave for a little while for fear of having to get in there with a backpack on and falling off the edge. So that one was written off. Anyway, this guy that I thought was outside that was breathing sounded like a guy to me, like really heavy breathing. I looked out of the cave with a head torch and couldn't see anything. Emma had to look, couldn't see anything. Sat back down, carried on with watching the fire burn down whilst we were sipping out a beer. And the next thing we started to hear really was a thumping. So I don't know if you've ever heard someone chopping wood. They're kind of like the thump you get if someone's got a log sat on top of another log ready for splitting. As the axe slams into the log that's being split, you hear that kind of that thump that comes alongside it. Quite a satisfying sound, but you can almost feel it if you like. We started to hear what sounded like distant log chopping, so like the thump of the axe hitting the log, as well as the heavy breathing. And it was, you can almost feel it with your feet. We were like stood in the cave, you could almost feel it, and it didn't make any sense really, because you'd have thought that the person splitting the wood would need to be within kind of like 4 or 5 feet of you, considering we were on a solid old chunk of rock, sat up quite high, like 14 feet of rock, sat above a path. And that seemed really weird. We were like, well, why is there somebody in close proximity chopping wood and still heavy breathing? And like, we weren't really in the mindset of, oh, this is terrifying, this is something really scary. I just thought someone else is going to be having a fire in somewhere nearby. And I thought, oh, kind of cool, but a little bit weird that we can hear it. Anyway, fire's burnt down a bit, burgers have gone on, they're sizzling away, but it's still taking a bit of time to cook because it's only a small fire pit. So we're watching them flipping the burgers over and just listening out for any more like kind of like wood chopping sounds. And it started and it stopped and it started and it stopped. And then we were like, okay, someone else is camping, no problem. We'll eat our burgers, have our beer, and then we'll just sort of chill out watching the stars. As we're eating the burgers, this song starts, and it's like a flute. And I have the audio. I sent Luke the audio, so hopefully you'll be able to hear this soon. But this really soothing, beautiful, whimsical kind of flute song starts playing. And it sounds distant, but also not that far away, because we could clearly hear it. You could hear it echoing off the cliffs. You could hear it echoing between the trees. And we're high up. We're really high up above a river.
Sam did indeed send me the audio clip. I haven't edited this clip. The only thing I've done is raise the volume to make it easier to hear. Here it is.
I thought, this is weird. There must be somebody either on their own or with somebody else doing what we're doing, but they've brought an instrument. And I thought, it's really pretty. It's really nice. But equally, I kind of want to know like who's near us, or if we're going to need to worry about a big party going on, and if we feel like safe to just sort of like bed down without being bothered by anybody. So I figured I'd go out of the cave and have an investigate, if you like. So I don't know why I took it, but I did take my pocket knife, like a little Opinel number 8. I don't know what I thought I was going to do with it, but I figured it's better to have something than not have something, if that makes sense. Took the head torch, grabbed onto the hammock strap that we had to rappel back out the cave, dropped back onto that path, and I went in the direction of where we collected firewood from. So I walked round the first kind of buttress of rock face to near where that angled plateau was. Nothing's there, and there's no light coming from any of the cave entrances. The cave entrances on that side of that buttress are quite small. They're kind of like 3 foot tall entrances. They're not somewhere you'd really sit and chill out compared to the one we're sat in, which is probably about 30 foot tall, 15, 20 feet wide. So nothing happening there. I thought, right, it's a bit odd. If I was expecting to hear that thumping and that volume of flute and breathing and chopping, I thought it would have been round that corner. So I thought, well, maybe the sound's carrying. There's a river down there, and you know the river can carry sound, even though you're not down by the river. I thought maybe just go a bit further. So take it a bit further round, another buttress into a straight line section where you can see a bit further ahead. Again, the path drops off to the right, really steep. Big old pine trees on the right-hand side. It's steep. There's no one's going to be sat on that slope, and I could see nobody down that straight section, but I thought I'd go down a bit further. Just keep going. Check the caves on my left as I go down. There's nothing. There's nobody there. There's nobody with head torches. There's nobody... I can't hear anything. It's really odd. I reach the next buttress and look around it, and there isn't anything. At this point, the trees get quite dense, and it heads towards that final cave, which gets really steep. I thought, there's no point. I'm not going to hear anything. If they're not going to be where I already was, I'm not going to hear them from further down there. So I turn back and I walk back towards the cave, checking both sides as I come back. Nothing's changed. I get back to the cave entrance. I think, you know what, I'll just go the opposite direction just to make sure. But at that point, the cliff above, the climbers, like the rock face the climbers use, starts to narrow down, and the ground comes up and the cliffs come down. It reaches like a point where you could just choose to walk on top of the cliff or beneath it. And there isn't much going on beyond that point. There's no cave entrance. It's just a gradual downhill from above the cliff and following that path that we entered on, so the climbers' entrance over that fence. I don't see anybody. There's nobody there. I go up to the fence line where there's a viewpoint, but there's nobody there either. And I can't work out what's going on. The whole time I've been walking, I've not been hearing anything. So I come back, I climb back up the cave using the hammock strap. Emma's there with beer in hand, just listening out, having a look. She's having a beer. We get back in and we sit down and I explain everything that I've told you. She's, that's really weird. And we think, oh, maybe it was just the wind catching some sound from down below. Anyway, not long after saying that, it starts again. And this is the point where we took the recording. So Emma recorded it on her iPhone, and she managed to capture the sound quite well. It's quite quiet on the recording, or it seems it, but you know what phone audio is like. It doesn't really do things justice, but you can hear it. And it starts again. And it continues for about 5-10 minutes and stops and continues again. And it was honestly so surreal. I can only describe it as we were kind of intrigued. I wasn't scared, but I couldn't explain it. And I think we both felt more, not concerned, but we just wanted to know who was up there and if that was going to be a problem for us. But it just didn't make any sense. We drove home. We got ourselves sorted out, had a shower, and then listened back to the audio and just amazed that we actually captured what we had and spent a fair bit of time discussing it. It was an unusual night, and it was something that we won't forget. And it's one that, weirdly, we don't always talk about very often unless we're somewhere when wild camping. In that cave wasn't a negative feeling. It was it felt nice, just unexplainable. But yeah, that is my weird story. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for listening to my story. Have a good one.
All right, what a story. Thanks, Sam. I really appreciate you coming on and chatting about it. So the first time you told me that, you sent me the audio clip. I was like, this is amazing. And then it gave me a lot of time to think about what it could have been, what it might have been. What I like about it is you're not saying this was a ghost. It's super eerie that you looked around, didn't see any sources of light, walked around, checked the other caves. I love these stories, but because I'm kind of a skeptic these days, I want to try figure things out. So I wonder if the pothole in your cave, I wonder if that's where the sound was coming from another cave. It could have been on the other side of the hill, but you're hearing it so clear because it's coming through such a closed, echoey space. That's the only thing I can think of. Anyway, really well told. Gave me some chills here and there, and yeah, I can't wait to hear more of your stories, Sam. So thank you so much for coming on, and guys, get your stories into me. I love hearing these. You can hit me up on Instagram at the tag HeyThat'sWeirdPodcast, or you can email me at heythat'sweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for sticking around to listen. Really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.